keyframes record changes to things in the scene. They store those changes in a gadget, which can be triggered using logic. This keyframe contains a crouching pose for Connie. Select the keyframe with X, and you'll see a preview of how it looks. Those dashed lines over Connie show that she's being changed by the keyframe. Press circle to deselect the keyframe, and she goes back to normal. To be able to activate the crouch keyframe, we need to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. Then you'll be able to make her crouch with a controller button. In the next step, I'll show you how to do exactly that. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu stay to the left. This is because they generate signals, and signals flow through gadgets from left to right in Dreams. You can also save the 3D space position of tweak menus and microchips, or pin them to the screen, using the buttons that appear at the top when hovering over the canvas. This will help you keep them tidy while you're editing logic, which is very important as it's easy to make mistakes. Now, let's take a closer look at that controller sensor. Ah, look, controller buttons. Just what we need. All playable characters contain a controller sensor gadget like this one. But the gadget can also be used for any situation where you want to detect button presses. To assign our keyframe to a button, we just need to wire it to the controller sensor. We won't use a circle button as that depossesses Connie, and X makes her jump. So how about the square button to crouch? Make sure you can see the keyframe on the microchip. Move the tweak menu with R2 if you need to. If you hover over the square button in the controller sensor menu, you'll see ports appear on either side of it. They're just like the ports you see on gadgets. Ports on the left are inputs, and ports on the right are outputs. Now, you need to be very precise for the next part, as it's easy to make a mistake. Carefully hover your imp over the output port of the square button, and press X to create a wire. Stretch that wire over to the keyframe, and connect it to the power port on the bottom of the gadget with X. If at any time you make a mistake, just undo it using the left directional button. Once your crouch move is all wired up, close the controller sensor tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1, then press circle to close. Now try out Connie's new crouch in play mode. See if she can make it under the second obstacle. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 and start the next step. Right, we're on to the final obstacle. There's no way around it, but it looks destructible. So we're going to make a slam attack for Connie so that she can smash through it. We'll start by recording a pose for the slam. We can do this using a keyframe. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my Keyframes and Timelines tutorial, you'll have a bit of a head start on this next part. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Animate menu. Select the keyframe with X. You'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and colour. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square. Cone is all. If we weren't to activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's controller sensor. If you've closed her microchip, scope back into her and then scope into the microchip to open it up again. The controller sensor is the large gadget on Connie's microchip. It has a controller icon on it. Open up its tweak menu with L1 and square. Now you have a microchip and a tweak menu open, you may need to arrange them on the screen. Make sure that the controller sensor and its tweak menu open icon the microchip. To activate the crouch, we're going to connect it to Connie's control. Well, that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, to activate the crouch, the microchip icon menu is because of controller sensor gadget. Right, we're on spam attack for Connie. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip if it isn't already open. If you've played my keyframe X, you'll now have a keyframe gadget on your imp. Stamp it somewhere in the scene with R2 or X. The keyframe records changes you make to objects and settings in the scene. It starts recording as soon as you stamp it. You can tell it's recording because your imp will change shape and colour. Now that we're recording, grab Connie's upper body with R2 and drag it gently down to the floor. Because we're scoped into her, we can move her body parts individually to create a pose. If we weren't scoped in, we'd move Connie's whole body. Notice that her knees automatically bend. Make sure her cone is all the way down to the floor so that you can't see her legs. Keyframes can record changes to anything, even tweak menu settings. So, just for visual flair, let's also make her glow. Hover over Connie's cone, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Because we're scoped in, this opens the tweak menu for the sculpture itself, rather than the puppet. All the settings on this page change the way Connie's cone looks. Look for the glow slider on the first page. Its icon is a sun. Raise the glow up to about 40%. Once you've set the glow, select Stop Recording in the context menu to store the changes to the keyframe. You can close the tweak menu now too. Just hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. Select the keyframe gadget with X to preview what's been recorded. Looks good. Deselect the keyframe by pressing circle. In the next step, we'll continue building Connie's slam attack. The next step is to place our new Connie animation into a timeline. Using a timeline will let us time the animations and effects of the slam attack. Go to the Assembly menu and back to the Animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp attack. Go to the Assembly menu and back to the Animate menu. Select the timeline with X. Hover over Connie's microchip and stamp a timeline above the crouch keyframe. Now let's open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. The slam attack should be a really quick animation. So adjust the canvas so it's only 1 second long. Any longer and it won't feel snappy enough. Hover over the edge of the timeline canvas so that a white line appears along it. You'll also see a white double-ended arrow appear next to the edge by your imp. When you see this, grab the edge of the canvas with X. Move your imp to shorten the timeline to 1 second. Make sure you don't select the trim button by mistake. It's a square button by the numbers at the top of the timeline. It has a black arrow on it. The timeline duration is now correct, but the space is very small. So let's zoom in a bit. Hover your imp over the timeline canvas, hold L1 and press the right directional button to zoom in. This will keep the timeline duration to 1 second long, but stretch the space so that you can fit more detail into it. If you need to zoom out, just hold L1 and press the left directional button. Now let's put our Slam Attack keyframe onto the timeline. Grab the keyframe with R2 and place it at the start of the timeline canvas. Make sure you've got the Slam keyframe and not the crouch one. The gadget automatically snaps to the surface of the canvas. The keyframe is only a fraction of a second long at the moment, but we need it to fill the length of the timeline. So hover over the keyframe and hold the up directional button to scale it. Make it the same length as the timeline. Now we want to wire the timeline up to a button press, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the Slam Attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's Slam Attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add mode to the power port. Over the output port of the L1 tweak menu, just like we did with the crouch. Move the timeline canvas so that you can see the controller sensor and the timeline gadget. Open the controller sensor tweak menu with L1 and square. I'm going to use L1 as the Slam Attack button. Hover over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's Slam Attack. Give it a try in play mode. Over the output port of the L1 button and press X to create a wire. Stretch the wire down to the timeline gadget and connect it to the power port on the bottom. You can now use the L1 button to perform Connie's Slam Attack. Give it a try in play mode. At the moment, it's just an animation, so it's not going to do anything to the blocks. But in the next step, I'll show you how to add some force to it. When you're ready to continue, return to edit mode, rewind time, and start the next step. The slam attack animation is all set up, but it's not doing much besides looking cool, so we need to add a gadget to our timeline that will emit a force when Connie slams the ground. The gadget we're going to use for this is the force applier. Go to the assembly menu and open the gadgets menu. Find the move as an output menu and open it with X. The icon for the force applier looks like a gust of wind. Select it with X to equip it to your imp. I hope you've still got the timeline open. If not, open it with L1 and X. Stamp the force applier onto the timeline canvas below the keyframe. Press circle to unequip the force applier from your imp. The force applier isn't very strong by default, so we'll need to tweak it. To open its tweak menu, hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square. At the top of the tweak menu is the force strength slider. Its icon is a beefy arm. Drag it all the way up to 100% using your imp. That will ensure the force emitted will overcome the gravity in the scene and the friction between the blocks. Next, increase the force speed to 10 meters per second. That will give the slam attack some punch. If you take a look at Connie, you'll see a green zone around her. Anything in this zone will be affected by the force applier. At the moment, the zone isn't much bigger than Connie. Hover your imp over the zone and arrow gizmos will appear. Grab them with R2 and move your imp to change the size of the zone. Or you can scale the zone more precisely in the force applier tweak menu. Go to the tab called Zone Size. Grab the zone size slider with X and set it to about 3.5 meters. Okay, let's test out Connie's new powers. Switch over to play mode. Possess Connie and give her new slam attack a try. Oops! Looks like it's more power than Connie can handle. The force applier is pushing her off the platform. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time. In the final step, I'll show you how to tweak the force applier so that it only affects the objects we want it to. To prevent the force applier from pushing Connie off the platforms, we're going to use labels. Scope back into Connie and open up her microchip. Open the timeline canvas with L1 and X. Now tweak the force applier with L1 and square. Labels can be given to any object in the scene, and gadgets like the force applier can detect them. In the force applier tweak menu, go to the Labels tab. By default, it will detect all labels. There are labels for all sorts of objects: foes, scenery, targets. The friend label is used for playable characters like Connie or friendly characters like Cuthbert. So if we deselect it, the force applier will no longer affect Connie. Hover over the friend button and press X to deselect it. It's the button with the heart icon. Now Connie should be able to blast through the blocks without firing herself off into space. Use her new skills to pass all the obstacles. And you can use your new skills to create some characters for your scenes. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the Grid Snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the Assembly menu and open the Guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that Grid Snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The Grid Snap Guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how GridSnap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that, so let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. Time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the Connectors section in the Assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The GridSnap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared, 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial.